Welcome back to Logos of God. Um, I didn't think I would be able to make another video before I left, but I did. Got an extra day. So, I want to tell you guys about a new argument for God that I've been developing that I have not seen before. So, this is very early in development. Okay? So, please do not cite this in an argument. Please do not quote me on any of this because I am still learning and I still have so much to learn. So again, I'm not an expert. Okay, so just getting that out there. Okay. So imagine it like a cross between the transcendental argument and the cosmological argument, just right. So it's a presuppositional argument, but it basically says the things that secular science points to is only explainable by Christian metaphysics. Now, why is that the case? Okay? The reason that's the case is because secular science points to a very specific fusion of Aristotle and Plato. Now, Plato's whole thing was transcendence, right? He was an idealist. He cared about the forms. He was like, oh, this universe is like high key an illusion because it's just a reflection of the higher world of forms, right? So we would say like this glass. Every single glass you can find all share in the same glassness or in the same ideal form, right? A sense of transcendence that explains the world. Now, there's a lot of things that we know empirically to be the case that point heavily towards transcendence, right? So let's look at math, for example, right? This is Redeem Zoomer's favorite argument for God. Is like you look at like the Fibonacci sequence, you look at like fractals, you look at like the Mandelbrot set, all of these like complex, and also like pi, all of these like insanely complicated mathematical forms that like basically the more you study math, the more it looks like that we didn't create math. Math was designed and we discovered it, right? Which means mathematical objects exist in real life, or what is called mathematical Platonism. So that's one crazy example of transcendence. Then you've got fine tuning, a famous argument for God, which is really just a part of the cosmological argument that like, oh, you've got like all these constants in the universe, like the strong nuclear force, the weak nuclear force, the electron force, the gravitational force, like all of these things that are insanely precisely fine tuned to support life, right? That's transcendence, right? And you also look at the way like the physics of the universe, like the natural laws, are essentially governed by math, right? That highly points to transcendence. But then there's other things that um essentially point towards immanence. And you look at quantum physics, right? One of the things that quantum physics shows shocked everybody was that fundamentally matter is indeterminate at such a fundamental level, right? So in quantum, in the not the quantum realm, but at a quantum level, right? Like a subatomic level, matter becomes chaos and indeterminate, right? It is basically like you look at like quantum physics and it's like superpositions of like using math to like calculate where a quantum particle is. mm, Something could be in two places at once. You can something could be nowhere. You could know where something is, right? like these quantum particles are not, they're like almost random. They're almost indeterminate, right? I don't want to say they're strictly random or indeterminate because they're not, right? Then there's this thing called scale hierarchy. I need to learn more about this because it is so fascinating, right? Basically, it shows that the universe is not bottom up, it's top down, right? And in my opinion, quantum physics shows this, right? Quantum physics shows that the very nature of reality itself, no, sorry, not the basis of like matter itself is indeterminate, but you look at like the physical world that's like visible around us, and it's so orderly, it just works. It flows, right? Now a lot of people will take that alone and look at that and say, "Oh, intelligent design." Sure, intelligent design, but there's way more going on than that, right? So you look at quantum physics, you get immanence, right? Immanence is basically like we get immanence from like Aristotelian teleology, right? That's why Aquinas loves using Aristotle's metaphysics in his arguments for God, right? Because he's using Aristotelian teleology to basically explain everything. He's using that to explain everything. And I think that given the fact that, modern science still they don't explicitly use his categories of like act potency, but they use very similar language to Aristotle's teleology. Now, again, science doesn't use teleology because they don't think things are designed, but they're basically they're just presupposing teleology and calling it something else. So we can just say they're using teleology, right? So we can get Aristotelian teleology from quantum physics. And from math and physics and fine tuning, we can get transcendence. Now, this is where things get crazy because then you can throw in the cosmological argument, right? Which is like the five ways, right? There's two layers to the cosmological argument. There's the really basic way, which is basically arguing against um, arguing against infinite regression, right? So like the standard like, oh, like everything is in motion and everything must be moved, therefore you can't go back infinite, you need an unmoved mover. Everything has a causal chain and you can't go back because that's infinite regression. You need an uncaused causer, and then all of God flows out from there. But it's way deeper than that because God didn't just knock over the domino chain and just let everything fall. That's deism. We do not believe that as Christians. This goes directly back to St. Augustine, and it goes back to classical theism. Because Christians, in some sense, believe in pantheism. We believe the entire universe participates in God's being. Now, what the hell does that mean? That sounds really complicated and weird. Basically, God doesn't just knock over the chain, he's actively sustaining it. Okay? The motion, right? So God is the unmoved mover, right? But God doesn't just move the thing, right? He doesn't just shove it and then just like is like, huh, and then just like lets it go, right? Like in deism, he's actively sustaining the motion and happening. Same thing with the causal chain. He doesn't just have the first cause and then just let it run. He's actively sustaining the causal chain by essentially imposing order on the created order, right? He has determined the created order. That is an insane level to the cosmological argument. This is why I think fine tuning is so relevant um, for um, for the cosmological argument. It's not just saying, oh, all of these like constraints of the universe, they just were designed that way. But no, you can go a layer further and say, no, God is actively sustaining the physical constants that allow the universe to function. He is physically allowing and sustaining gravity. He is physically sustaining the strong and weak nuclear force, the electron force, etc., right? Like thermodynamics, things like that. He is sustaining all of these forces, right? So that's a huge another level that makes the cosmological argument so insane to think about, right? So you combine that with this like sense of transcendence and immanence, that science leads towards. And again, I need to look way more into science so I can really, really properly demonstrate, because I can't at the moment, right? But those two things can only, you don't just get the cosmological argument, which could be, you could explain that with just generic classical theism, and you could get Islam, you could get Judaism, or something like that. No, 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 no. Now, I will say the sustaining thing does heavily point towards Christianity, because Christianity is the really only one of the three Abrahamic religions, only religion period that has a strict doctrine of classical theism combined with pantheism, to my knowledge. But there is no other religion that can explain transcendence and immanence at the same time. Okay, the reason Christianity specifically explains that is because God is transcendent and immanent. Okay, he's not just immanent in the sense that he's omnipresent, right? Because immanence doesn't just mean omnipresence. Sure, you could explain it using omnipresence, but it's deeper than that, right? Transcendence is obvious. Okay, God is transcendent from the universe because he created the universe, he's the one divine essence, yada yada. Okay, Judaism believes that, Islam believes that, Christianity believes that. There's nothing unique about also deism believes that. There's nothing unique about transcendence. Now, when you throw in sustaining, it gets more and more unique. But immanence is really what seals the deal. And why is that? Because, and this goes into the transcendental argument of God is God is personal, right? God is not just an impersonal force or a deity that is an observer or an other, or is not interested in the universe more than just observing it, right? God is a personal being, right? That's what we describe God as in Christianity, right? God is three persons, one essence, one nature. That's the Trinity, right? So, to explain the transcendental argument, right? Like, um, articulated by someone like Van Til or like someone modern like Jay Dyer, all of epistemology presupposes the Christian God, right? Because if you're not presupposing Christianity, then you have no rationale for trusting your own reasoning, trusting that you can know knowledge, trusting that you're real, trusting that other things are real. All of these like dense epistemological topics cannot be trusted by anything but Christianity. Now, why is it specifically Christianity? Because knowledge and epistemology are covenantal, right? Christ is the word, right? That's the logos, right? No other religion has such a strict doctrine of the logos. The logos is eternal and personal and incarnated into this universe through the hypostatic union. That means fundamentally knowledge is ontological, meaning knowledge is true in a way that would be impossible if the incarnation weren't decreed, or if Christ didn't exist as the Logos, right? Christ is the reason why we can even know things in the first place, if that makes sense, right? We're also made in the image of God. And if we're made of the image of God and one of the three persons of God is the Logos or the knowledge, right? Then that means we can know knowledge. And that means also that we can know God. And also, God reaches out to at each and every one of us in order to have a relationship. Even I, as a Calvinist, believe that, surprisingly, right? So, but I'm sure you guys can see how those two things would go together, because that same sense of that same personalness, that's a weird word, but that same sense of personal being that is entirely unique to Christianity also applies to the metaphysical nature of immanence that essentially allows us to use Aristotelian teleology, right? Basically, what this results in is where reality is determined by forms that are transcendent, but the forms themselves are also immanent. The only way you can explain this is where the forms themselves are necessarily grounded in God, but that the forms are really real, and every individual object shares its essence, right? while they're also being transcendental abstract forms, things like mathematical objects, right? This is just Christianity. This is already Christianity. Not even like that's already Christianity, not even getting into like logos and how and like epistemology, not even getting into like morality, not even getting into like all of this other stuff, right? So this is already like crazy. Now again, I stress the fact I am not a genius. As much as I would like to think I am. I'm a 19-year-old kid. Um, I don't have a degree. I barely graduated from high school. So please, please, for the love of God, do not cite this argument in a debate. Do not like cite me as a source, okay? Because I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. So I'm trying to learn intensely about math and physics simply for the sake of building this argument up. Because I think if it does, this would be like a crazy argument. And that's not me just thinking that I discovered something crazy. I see the potential of this and it's crazy. Okay. I might low key be an idiot and I might just be wrong. So if I got something wrong, please tell me. But yes, this shit is crazy, man. I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, not too much of a long video today because I ramble, and so I explained it pretty quickly just because I ramble. So I will see you guys another time. Peace.